Good evening, members of the GFN. My name is Veerle, as most of you will know. And for the past year, I have been the welfare officer of the Groningen Feminist Network. Now, my function as a welfare officer, which was a function that we kind of created as a new board, it didn't really exist yet. My function was to, first of all, to make sure that people would feel safe and okay within the spaces and the events that we organize as a community. Um, and I think the second function that kind of really became my job almost was to manage the weekly meetings and to make sure that we have topics and speakers for the weekly meetings. And then also when we have a topic, when we have someone who wants to speak on a topic, to check in with that person, like what they are going to talk about, and make sure that they provide content warnings where necessary, and stuff like that. Yeah, just I was both kind of trying to create the planning for the weekly events, the weekly meetings, and at the same time, I was trying to make sure that these meetings would run smoothly. And for that, I think it was very important to make sure beforehand that we kind of had an idea of the content and the plan that a person would have for running the weekly meeting. We really try to get away from this situation where it's just the board organizing most of the meetings. Like we really wanted really wanted to emphasize the community-led nature of the Groningen Feminist Network. So I really wanted to try and get as many people from the community to come and talk on a topic or organize a meeting or an activity or something. I tried to make it very clear from the beginning that the weekly meetings don't have to have the same format all the time, and and that they can be anything that we want them to be as a community. And I think we succeeded relatively well in that. Although I would say that the presentation with a discussion kind of format still ended up being the most popular or most common format for our meetings. Maybe also just because it's something we're used to, and quite a lot of people enjoy it, I think. Although I did hear some criticism about it, but then also I try to really like encourage people, like, okay, so if you have another idea of what we can do, then please tell us. And for that reason, we also introduced like some other formats, such as or things that kind of happened a few times and then it kind of became a format, were things like the bring your own discussion meetings, which I thought were always very fun. You start out with no clear idea of what you're going to talk about, and people just bring their topics that they want to talk about, and it almost always becomes like a really interesting conversation. So that was really nice. And of course, we had our more chill meetings, like board game and chill and craft and chill kind of meetings. And what I also really enjoyed were meetings where we kind of like prepared for something that was coming up, such as like creating signs for an anti-racism demo. That was really nice. So as an organization, we kind of already decided, as a community, we decided that we probably wanted to go to this demo protest, and most of us wanted to go. So we just organized like a weekly meeting that was all about that, basically, about preparing signs and stuff. And I think we had a few more things like that where like we were basically just like using the meeting. Oh yeah, for example, for Pride, we also had a preparation meeting for Pride, and it was also quite nice. So we did some interesting stuff, and I don't know. For me, as a welfare officer, like I've just really enjoyed my time fulfilling this role so far. I really enjoy meeting new people at the GFN, meeting the people who decide on a whim to finally like get over their fear and just go to the GFN for the first time, and then like talk to them and make them feel welcome, make them feel comfortable, give them a cup of tea, stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know, I just made so many cool new friends by being in this role of being kind of like the welcoming person, or like the host, I guess, or hostess of these meetings. I don't know, it's been absolutely amazing uh, for my social life. It's like, I don't know, I feel really extremely embedded in this community. I feel like I'm a part of this community, and this community has become a part of me, and that makes me extremely, yeah, it makes me really happy. It feels like I really have a group of people that I belong to, and yeah, so I think that's something that I would highly recommend anyone who really cares about the Groningen Feminist Network, and especially people who really care about its more radical agenda, about its more politically engaged leftist agenda, to really like dive into it and just become a board member, and you will be in the midst of organizing all this, and it's like very stressful, but it's a lot of fun. And most of the time, it's just a lot of fun, and it's not that stressful, to be honest. I had a lot of meetings where all I had to do was just look at someone's PowerPoint presentation and say like, "This looks amazing. This is excellent. Go ahead." And then all I had to do was pour some tea, So it was actually not that stressful in many cases. I think if I have to talk about the more stressful or negative sides to my position as a welfare officer, well, it's difficult because we are such a small community-led organization that we are kind of a community. We are a tiny little family, and it's a very queer family, and we take care of each other. But at the same time, it's also like this very small group of people who are all queer, many of whom have romantic connections with each other. There are friend groups, etc., etc. So at times, I feel like I think the most negative part of my experience as a board member was, yeah, just being kind of part of this soap, I guess. At some points, there was a lot of drama among members, and I was somehow always in the middle of it. Even if I didn't want to be, I didn't have much of a choice. As a welfare officer, being connected to like almost everyone knows me. Everyone knows me as kind of like one of the faces of the board and of the Groningen Feminist Network. So I was very very much in the middle of a lot of the drama and things that went on that weren't so nice among members. But I guess that's also kind of like a burden that you take on if you do choose to become a board member, and especially if you don't choose to have a function like a secretary or treasurer, but more of a really community involved function like this. Of course, it's kind of like, as you become part of the community becomes part of you, and then anything that is not so nice that happens within the community also directly affects you, because you're like in the middle of everything, right? So it's kind of unavoidable, I feel. And I have made choices that I regret in retrospect, and I've made choices that I have not made choices that I regret making. So I think it's just, that's just being human and being part of a small community of human beings who are all different and who all have their own hang-ups and their own shit that they're trying to deal with. And sometimes stuff gets really messy. So that's kind of the more negative part of it, I guess. But to return to something more positive, what I really, really am very proud of, and what I really consider like an achievement of the new board, of the well, I keep calling it a new board, but it's like the board that is now hopefully on its way out. It's the board of 2018, 2019. So the board that I was part of, what I consider an achievement of the board that I was part of, is that we really managed to pull the Groningen Feminist Network into a more activist direction. We got way more involved in different forms of activism. We showed up at the anti-racism demos. We made connections with climate activists, and they became kind of part of our organization. And I saw a lot of our members also connecting with Extinction Rebellion and with Fridays for Future. So that's really nice to see these kinds of exchanges among different activist groups, and people not necessarily all sharing the same main cause, but showing up to each other's protests and helping each other out. That was just amazing. And I think that's also like what really created a great atmosphere for us to, for Pride also. Of course, Pride wasn't really a Groningen Feminist Network achievement. I'm not really supposed to pitch it like that, but there were a lot of Groningen Feminist Network volunteers involved in its organization, and just the great connections that we already had with lots of people within the Groningen activist scene made things so much easier and made it possible, for example, for us to have a sound system without having to pay for it and stuff like that, and having all these interesting connections with all these interesting people who are in Groningen and who are leftist or queer and doing interesting things, that really helped to get the first queer pride of Groningen off the ground. And it helped us in general also, just like what I see Groningen Feminist Network, the way I see the Groningen Feminist Network is that it can really be like a connecting space for different activist groups that are in Groningen and that are all kind of geared towards the same kinds of goals. They're leftist, they're radical, they want to change things for the better. And these groups can help each other and they can learn about each other if we provide them with a platform to learn about each other. And I really see that as a really interesting thing, a really interesting role that the weekly meetings could also fulfill, where like our weekly meetings, I'm really trying to invite other groups, especially the siblings of the Groningen Feminist Network, or like our sister groups within SIAN, Stichting Inclusive Action North, the foundation that we created. I'm also really proud of that, by the way, that we just managed to create this foundation and finally now have a foundation through which the Groningen Feminist Network can apply for funding, which I think will make a big difference for the future. So we kind of we created something that future boards and the future of the Groningen Feminist Network in general will really profit from, I think, because it will allow them to do projects which require some form of finances, some form of budget that currently haven't been possible, So I think that's really cool. And in the way I see Groningen Feminist Network in relation to SIAN is that, within SIAN, of course, you have these other groups, Black Ladies of Groningen, you have Queer Pride Groningen, and you have, I'm sorry, what's the last one? Oh yeah, of course, you have Asterisk, the activist little activist group that works for trans and intersex rights. And I see the GFN really as a place where all these groups can come together. And I would love to invite all these sibling groups to take over the stage and take over the mic every now and then during our weekly meetings and talk about the projects that they're doing and the things they're engaged in and the things they believe in. And then maybe also that can really help draw new people into such a project. Let's Talk About Sex is another example of a project that I would really like to get also involved in weekly meetings so that it becomes like more connected again to the Groningen Feminist Network. It's been doing really amazing stuff, but it has become a little bit disconnected from the GFN, and I don't think that's necessarily. I think it's not really a bad thing, but it can really benefit both the Groningen Feminist Network and the Let's Talk About Sex campaign to have more interaction with each other, and for people within the GFN who are very motivated and very passionate about the topic of sexual health and sexual consent, sexual well-being, and sexual harassment and safety and such topics. There are quite a few people within the GFN who are quite interested in those topics and are quite passionate, have passionate opinions about them. I think it would be great if we could like make the way from the Groningen Feminist Network into the Let's Talk About Sex campaign more transparent and more obvious to people, you know? But I don't know, I just have a lot of plans like that where I think just in general the Groningen Feminist Network, and especially the regularity of our weekly meetings, it really creates the sense of community, and it creates kind of a steady platform for groups and projects to pitch themselves towards the larger group, to educate the group, but also to draw new members and new energy into their project. And I really like that kind of dynamic that we have going on there. And I hope that in the future that will grow a lot. So, I talked for a long time. I gave you kind of like all of my views on how the Groningen Feminist Network has been doing and what I have been doing within the Groningen Feminist Network as a board member 2018-2019. So I hope this gives you some idea. Overall, I just really, really enjoyed my time as a board member, and I've just been extremely lucky with my fellow board members being the absolute amazing people that they are, and being so patient and being so dedicated and so creative, and putting in really the time and the effort that it takes to do this stuff, and yeah, and just being also really amazing and friendly people who are at the heart of this community, and I think that's really important. So if you feel like you love this community and you want it to continue being awesome, then please don't worry too much about your qualifications or whether whether you have, the perfect skills or something to be a board member. But the most important thing, I think, is just that you care about this community and that you want it to stay on this path that it's now, where it's on now, and really stay like a radical force of good within the city of Groningen. And I think if that's the way you feel about the Groningen Feminist Network, and you feel like you really want to become more of a part of it than you already are, then applying for board membership is something that I can highly recommend. Okay, that is it for me for today. See you soon.